Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dana Being Dana, and clearly I'm not Dana, but this is Dana Being Dana, show number 6 on IntellectualRadio.com and iHeart radio station. My name is Ernest, and I've been a guest of Dana's for a couple of her shows so far. And she, as she mentioned last week, she's in New Orleans with a number of other high-powered professional black women lawyers. Over 1,000 of them converging at the Corporate Council Women of Color Conference. She called me this morning. She was having a good time. We chatted and talked, so she sends her regards to everyone and is glad that folks who are tuning in are tuning in. But we have a special panel show tonight. We're going to talk, just like on the flip side of what Dana did last week. She did a show called Girls Trip, precursor to the conference that they're in, and a number of black women lawyers joined her. Well, tonight we're going to do a show, and it's going to be a candid and open conversation with the brothers who are sitting here with me tonight, and we're going to be talking about tackling trust and transparency in relationships, and we mean relationships in the broadest sense of the word, in the sense of friendships and any other kinds of relationships, family and marriage and dating and what have you. But we really wanted to just speak from our hearts and speak to the hearts of men and to those women who are listening, to those who have men in your lives that you love and that you want to learn a little bit more about some of the insights into a man's mind and a man's heart. But before we get into the show, I just wanted to give a couple of quick announcements. First and foremost, next week's show at the end, but next week's show is the Real Housewives of Naperville. So Dana's going to be joined by a few of her Naperville friends, and so we're excited to see who some of the folks that she brings on are. So definitely look forward to that next week. And this, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts are with all of the families, and not just in Houston, but also most recently in Puerto Rico, all of our fellow citizens in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as our brothers and sisters in various Caribbean islands that were impacted. We definitely want to not only send our hearts and prayers, but we want to remind everyone that while the media coverage may not be as great and the attention may not be as great as it was in the last couple of other storms here on the mainland, we want to make sure that we don't forget them. So reach out and figure out some ways to get connected to, whether it's the Red Cross or other entities, and just remember that there's lots of folks in need that we can be support to. Further ado, however, I want to get into tonight's show. We have four outstanding guests tonight, and I want to let them take a moment to introduce themselves in their own way. But I just ask each person to just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself, maybe a little bit about your passion in life or something of interest that you want to share with the audience. Why don't we start with you, Dallas?
Okay, my name is Dallas Scott. Currently, I'm in ministry full time. I'm a husband, father, and now a grandfather. And when Ernest approached me about this opportunity, I was excited because one of my passions is just seeing people reach their full potential in God. And that applies even more so to men because of how most of us are raised and what we're taught. Sometimes have a tendency to become an island separate and apart from everything. And I've learned over the years that no man is an island.
Amen.
And we need each other. And we are only as strong as the weakest link. And we try to I try to, in my ministry, blot out the weak links, make us all strong. So that's a little bit, I'm excited about tonight and what it's going to avail, and even more excited about the impact it'll have on all those listening.
Great, thank you, Dallas. Quincy, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Quincy Payton. Currently, I'm a dean at City College of Chicago up on the north side, Truman College. I am single. However, I used to be a marriage counselor for about 4 years. I still do it. I keep one couple in counseling at a time. So I have one right now, and it's going great. Some of my hobbies, I'm a novice American historian, and I love sports, love working out, playing basketball and football. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, sir. How about Derek? Why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Derek Hooker. I'm a partner at a general practice law firm in Chicago. I am from the west side of Chicago. I say that because it served as the reason for me being a part of 4 community service organizations, all having a common theme to represent the underrepresented youth in the city of Chicago. And I'm very passionate about being on this panel, especially as it relates to the strength with respect to men speaking to other men about any issues that they face in this life and as we move forward together.
Right hand Ron. Ron, introduce yourself. We're going to get his whole body, just not his hand
Just
tonight.
be the right hand. My name is Ron Baker Jr. I'm a comedian. And
And you're passionate about that.
I'm passionate about telling these jokes.
And for those who missed the, I guess it was the second show, Ron was sitting toward the end, not quite where he is now, but for whatever reason, the camera was angled in a way where only thing showing up was his hand. And so somebody on Facebook Live started calling him Right Hand Ron.
Right hand Ron.
So that is now his name.
That's why.
That's right.
I was wondering, like, he's about to hit me or something?
No.
Right hand. He got a good right hand, but no, that was all that was on the screen that day.
Right. We have a low budget around here, so it's only one.
It's
camera.
only one hand.
No 2-shot camera.
No, Desi Lou with
Right.
3 cameras, right?
Yeah. Now you gotta get a little TV reference.
Yeah, there you go. No, but thank you, brothers. And for those who don't know who I am, my name is Ernest Tuckett. I'm also a lawyer, like Derek, in-house counsel at a major company. I run our legal team. I'm definitely very passionate about being on this show. I'm very honored that Dana would ask me to be her guest host tonight, and she trusts me enough, and I know she's watching. I think she just saw her tag somebody. So hello, Dana, and we're gonna do it right for you tonight. I know, like Dallas, I've been involved. Dallas and I met through church in D.C. I'm from New York originally. I spent a lot of time in D.C. and we worked together. He was the leader of our men's ministry at one point in time, and then I started to work in that in the same time. But before I started working in there, not as a job, but as an application, I was one of the young men who came up. My father had passed when I was 15. I was about 26, 27, just starting my career. And the brothers in the church had started these accountability groups that we'll talk about a little later. And really, this topic came out of not just that experience, but the experience of being blessed to have a number of different kinds of relationships, most of whom I didn't even realize the value of until I needed them. And I think it's important for us as men, as Dallas was saying in the beginning, to think about how the various influences on us in society, how it impacts the way in which we relate, interact, even with ourselves and with others. So we used the tagline about no man is an island, and we can't thrive in this life alone. And I know that men generally get the rep of not opening up and not sharing, not talking, either not being in touch with our emotions or not necessarily being expressive, or both, depending on who you might talk to. So I wanted us to maybe start off by talking about that concept, that idea of us as men, and as a gender. Are we free? Are there some insights, some thoughts you have around that concept of men, being either by nature or nurture, being off emotionally, not as expressive? Just free-flowing ideas. Anybody else when they want to get started? Maybe Quincy, you want to start us off on this one?
I can certainly try. So I would say, starting off, I think men culturally are taught one's feelings, sometimes associated with femininity and a feeling of weakness and anti-manliness, because a man is supposed to withhold his feelings and yes, say what is on his mind, but not get sensitive and emotional on things that actually maybe really he might be struggling with. In practice, what I see is really kind of in some cases, a primitive way of being able to express oneself when someone is trying to express their feelings. Men don't know how, in many cases, to express their feelings effectively, whether it be to their loved one or to whomever they're talking to. So it's a combination of the culture that we're growing into, and then also maybe an inability to express it in a way that is effective and productive.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about male socialization and talk about the role to which men are relegated historically, both within the family, within the community, and just throughout the eras. I think men are taught to be strong, silent, that the man is the provider, the head of the household. He represents strength, protection, financial stability. And with all of that, I think you create an environment where men see being emotion filled or having the ability or the desire to want to talk to other men or to anyone about a problem is seen, as he said, as a sign of weakness. It's emasculating for the men, but not understanding that there's actually strength in being able to communicate, strength and being able to align yourself with people of the same ilk, i.e. other men, and just understanding that, like he said, no man is an island, but I'll say no man can walk alone.
Right, I got you. So Ron, do you agree with that in sharing and opening up, as Derek was just saying, that there is strength in that? If you agree with that, then maybe say a bit about where the strength comes from in your perspective, when we open up and share with one another as people that we trust and join together in relationship like that.
I do agree with what they're saying, that culturally we're taught to be not to express, to hold it in. I say there's a two-cry maximum per year for a man. You have a maximum of 2 cries publicly you can show. If you're in church and the sermon is good, she don't want to look at you, she crying, and you crying and snot coming down your nose too. So you got 2 per year. Go in a closet somewhere and let it out. Go in a car, right. Whatever, you got to go to a bar, but only somewhere dark. Somewhere dark. Somewhere dark.
With some shades on.
Yes, with shades, because I got 2.
Does it count if nobody sees you?
Right. Yeah, I don't care if it's a wedding, your daughter getting married. Hold that snot back and just suck it up. But men are taught to be that way, and we don't know how to release it. Right. And when we don't know how to release it, it causes all type of heart conditions. We have all type of mental, where we just don't know how to process this anger or these emotions to get out. We have to talk to someone. And many times we fear that somebody just won't understand, or they'll look at us as we're weak or soft. And men are dealing with real issues that have to be addressed.
I just want to say one quick thing about this, because we seem like we are correctly focusing on men's how we've been acculturated in not communicating and choosing not to, and expressing ourselves appropriately. Sometimes we actually go to the opposite end of that, and we express ourselves in this volatile, angry, ferocious way, right, which is equally. So I want to make sure that that's a two-pronged issue, that we can be strong and silent, but we also can be violent with our words, right, and too aggressive.
Yeah, I find that's a really good point, Quincy. I find sometimes we bottle it in for so long that it only comes out that way. Or sometimes fear comes out as anger, or hurt comes out as anger, because we feel like that's the only appropriate expression, or we avoid the inappropriate in our head expression so long that it pops out. That's a good point to make. We want to find that balance. Dallas, what are your thoughts then on this?
I was just thinking the brothers are spot on in terms of the assessment and how we have been raised culturally. I think some of those things, and I'm 61, some of those things that we're talking about are still issues today. And I don't always understand why, because we continue to evolve and progress as humans. But that one aspect of our behavior is still pervasive today. I think about my dad because he was a strong influencer in my life. And I can recall, and Brother Ron said the wedding piece. I saw my dad cry, and there was a tear when my sister got married.
Okay.
First 30 years, one tear.
Wow. Really?
Never, no emotion, none of that. And I think that was also the behavior of my older brothers as well. And for some reason, for me, I decided, and the other part of that is the one tear. My dad never hugged us, and there were 5 guys, or never really told us that he loved us. So as I began to mature and come into my own, my dad being a key influence in my life, I really had to determine, is this convey to my son? Is this what I want to be to my son? So as soon as Dallas was born, I kissed him. And I would kiss him every day. And I would tell him as he grew older, even through college, how much I love and appreciate him. I think what has to happen is we know what the tradition is, but somebody's got to take the bull by the horns and say, this is just not healthy.
How did you figure out what to do? I mean, obviously the affection part, you mentioned kissing your son, but talk a bit about how that's great, how you figured out, and what were the things that educated you on how to go about doing it? I've heard some people say they just do what they wish they had, right? That's one aspect.
And that's one
but
aspect.
What else
I
is there?
began to at the church when I joined the church, and the bishop at that point was a kind of warm type of guy. And I just began to look at him.
Okay.
And I took away things that I thought were good, remember what my father had instilled in me, and I kind of meshed that together and decided this is better.
Okay.
Not that it was right, but this is better, because my whole point of life was to help my kids to be balanced.
Okay.
And help them to be able to journey through life in a real way.
Okay.
The good, the bad, the indifferent. And I thought my experiences would help them to be successful.
Okay.
And I knew that my son needed to know that it's okay to cry. It's okay to share with other men. Don't keep that bottled up.
And not
because
just
it was
2
at
cries.
the church.
Twice.
And not
Right.
you gave him 4 cries?
You better go chop some wood or something.
Don't get that, bottled up, because it was also in the church that someone approached me. They said, hey, I need to talk to you because my marriage is failing. I don't know how to handle this. And this was a leader in the church.
Okay.
And he looked the part, he and his wife looked the part, but they had not slept together in a whole year.
Wow.
And he couldn't go to bishop. So he came to the group.
Okay.
And he tested to see if he would share.
Okay.
Would that get out in the church?
Gotcha.
And it didn't. And that's how the group really
That's
grew.
How the group grew.
But that's when I realized we're men. We're real people, and we have real issues. But we're told
not to
that
talk
we're
about
not
it.
supposed to.
Guys, why don't we pick up on that point that Dallas touched on? To reflect on yourself growing up, and whether it was your dad or someone else, or your dad and someone else, who were those models, those role models you looked to that helped you to grow into being the kind of man with that kind of balance to learn how to start communicating and interacting and sharing oneself? Anybody want to jump in with that?
Okay, so it's interesting, Dallas. Our our upbringing, our experiences couldn't be any more parallel.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest of 8, 4 boys and 4 girls. And my father didn't cry, didn't hug us either. In fact, I remember when I was in 8th grade, I'll never forget this. I was told by my mother and father, you'll get an electric keyboard if you graduate on the honor roll. And so I was like, okay, bet, no problem. So they hid this keyboard even before they challenged me to that in a corner in a garbage bag. I never looked in a garbage bag, right? And so I made the honor roll, graduating. My mother, she takes the bag, she opens it and pulls it, the bag down, and I see this keyboard. My brother comes in and pick it up or whatever. I run over to my father and I hug him around his waist. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Or whatever. My father goes, okay, you can get off of me now. So I got off of him, like, don't touch daddy, he doesn't do that. And so the only time, and very similar to your story, Dallas, I feel like we're zygote separated at birth, but my grandmother died, and they were lowering the casket, and my father buckled at his knee, and one tear came out of his eye. And I never forget, I stood, by the plot, and I was just looking, and I looked at my brother Pete, and I'm looking like, is that daddy crying? Like, that's crazy. But it didn't dawn on me, like, it's his mother. Of course, he's going to cry over that. But fast forward, so my mother dies in the house, and my father's sitting on the front porch. Family goes crazy when she takes her last breath, and he's just sitting there stoic, not moving at all. Didn't cry, didn't do anything. And it wasn't until my mother died that I had what I would call my Viola Davis moment, where I was crying
and the tear
down.
And the bubbles all together.
And this actually happened at work, believe it or not, because I wasn't dealing with it in the right way. And so I started going to counseling, another taboo thing. But I found so much value in the counseling. And I think that it was because of counseling that I started to speaking with other men who are going through similar issues. And then coincidentally, I have 3 friends who have mothers who actually have cancer. And they talk to me about that right now.
Right.
But I will tell you, a counselor can sympathize with you. They could help you work through your issues, but typically they can never empathize with you because they're not going through the same situation that you're going through. Especially, and most men, especially Black men, have female counselors because they feel more comfortable speaking to women, and I have a female counselor, so I'm guilty of that. But it's because of that situation that I now have a stronger relationship. And I always thought I had a strong relationship with both my fraternity brothers and also my male friends, but through counseling, it strengthened the relationships with them.
Okay.
And I found lots of value in that.
That's great. Great. Any one of you guys, Ron or Quincy?
So my father was not there. I came from an absentee father home. My father was in and out of jail from the time I was kindergarten till to this day. So I never had a relationship with him, and it deeply affected me in ways that I was not aware of at the time. But all the major male milestones, learning how to tie a tie, my shoes, learning how to drive, shave, those were all things that I learned by myself on my own, literally by myself. There was no one there. There was no one in the room. So my experience was with men that I gained a heightened awareness of the men that were around me, even if they were only around me for a few minutes, and what I could take from them. So I learned how to shave on my own, but it was because I watched my barber shave someone else when I was waiting for my hair to be cut. I learned how to tie a tie in Macy's, watching a white man do it. This was pre-YouTube days where you couldn't just teach yourself. And to that, I learned when I am in a room full of men, I am always conscious of what I can take from them. And when I sat down here today at this table and I heard what everybody did, the first thing I thought about was, we have a comedian here. I would love to have him come to my college and perform. We have 2 lawyers here. We're always in need of legal questions and things of that nature. It was the first thing that I thought of. And that we have someone from the ministry here, which in terms of spiritual guidance and learning from our elders, in particular those who are in the ministry, there is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge to be ascertained. So what I learned when I was 10, carry with me in this very moment. And that's what I've gotten from the men in my life. Never lived with a man until I got to college.
Wow. That's powerful. I mean, what you say there about how you recognize what you were missing and you looked for it in different places, simple things like tying a tie.
In the most minute.
Right. And those,
in a moment type things.
Those minute things, and I'll go to Ron in a sec, those minute things really make or break you sometimes. I remember, and I haven't shared this story very much with anybody. Still kind of embarrassing. When I was in junior, I got pretty good at basketball. I was always a baseball player. My oldest brother and I were baseball. My oldest brother was football. And I got good at basketball. Not great, but good. And I remember my friends egged me on, go try out for the team, go try out for the team. And I packed a little bag, didn't have a gym bag or anything. You know, and my dad had passed a year or two before. And I walked down to the school. I get all the way to the door of the gym. I hear the sneakers squeaking, and I start thinking about how embarrassing it'll be if I go in there and stink this place up. And I turned around and I went home. And I thought about that years later. I said, if my dad was still alive and was sitting in that house, I would have wanted to go in the house and tell him how I did that day. Not that my mother wouldn't have been involved, but I didn't even talk to my mother about it, really. I mentioned it once. But if my dad, I wondered. I didn't know for sure, but I wondered. And I thought about, my oldest brother was off at college at that point. And so it was kind of like, I thought about that a lot, and I thought about even the smallest thing. That feeling of not feeling comfortable. There's a movie scene where the guy was a boxer and he was sitting at the table with all the place settings, didn't know how to use it, and he waited till the little girl started using it and watch what she did, and then and it's just those little things that keep us from opening up, keep us from feeling comfortable, and make us sometimes disqualify ourselves from certain things in life, whether it's a relationship, a job, or basketball tryout, or whatever it might be. Someone to talk to, a friend or whomever it might be, can really give you that courage sometimes to try something that you haven't tried before. So Ron, anything you wanted to share related to what was it that kind of drove you to what were the people you looked to, I should say, to really think about, I want to be this kind of man when it comes to communication and being open? Did you look to your dad? Did you look to other role models, or how did you kind of go about coming to the place where you are?
I had a great privilege of, my dad is still around. My grandfathers were there on each side. One was a tyrant, one was real quiet, but they were men. They fish, straight, shaved with a straight razor, no water, no shaving cream, just real hardcore men. They were not affectionate. They did not say, I love you. My dad was semi-affectionate, and he would show love, but not always would he say, I love you, even though he's a preacher and a pastor as well. I had a lot of great young men around me, Rocky Hill, Skip Hill, Byron Morgan, Arthur Livingston. These names probably mean nothing. Thornridge. Rocky. So I had great examples of young men who made sure my brother and I were treated in a proper way. I have a bad example of men around me. I had great examples, and then even Mr. Livingston, the fathers of these men were great men, but they were also old school, hardcore men. But my father many times pulls up a pastoral screen, and he'll use scripture. But how do you really feel? I know what the scripture says, but I'm talking to you. And he would many times, even till this day, even though he knows how to express himself, he does not go deeper. And I thank God for being able to have relationships. I do know Darek and I have mutual friends that I talk to that I can really go to with a real problem and be vulnerable and be open and not have any fear of being attacked. And even Darek and other people that I've met through Darek, they know how to communicate. They know how to, and that's what I appreciate. I'm not one of those men that feel like we have to argue all the time, or I have to be right. We know how to listen to each other and express one's opinion. But my dad was just so great in being able to show me balance. I would have liked to gotten deeper, but he really showed a lot of balance. And my grandfathers who are no longer with us, one passed away just not too long ago. They showed me stability.
Yeah.
They may have done some stuff in the street, but they took care of that family.
Gotcha.
He said, as long as you take care of your family, she may let you get away for some stuff, but you got to pay those bills first. You got to go to work.
Gotcha. No, thank you, brothers. Why don't we take a quick break? And we're here live on Dana Being Dana on IntellectualRadio.com, which is an iHeart radio station. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Just sit tight, and we'll join right back into the conversation. We're back. Show number 6 of Dana Being Dana, Man to Man, tackling vulnerability and trust and transparency in relationships. And we're going to pick right up where we left off. And I'll say this: what you shared in this first half is just so rich. And I want to now pivot and to talk. I think we've shared quite a bit about some of the how-tos and some of the practical insights and advice that you would give men, even in our sharing. And I think it's been awesome. And I remember to have a number of male friends, including my oldest brother in particular, with whom I could talk. I always marvel at that. Even as I meet guys now in my older years, I always seem to gravitate towards guys in particular who I can really talk to, and women too, whether I'm dating or friends with them, that I can really open up and talk to. And so that's been a real blessing. And I can point to one particular time of life, and I wanted to ask Dallas to talk about this, was during I got out of law school, started working real intense job at law firms, like, where we both cut our teeth at law firms, and Dark's there now as a partner. And I just remember the high stress of everything. And my dad died when I was 15, and I really grieved for my dad, truly grieved for my dad about 6 years later, when I was in college, 21 years old. And I realized how much I was missing. I wanted to pick up that phone and call and ask him, okay, I'm feeling the way I think you were feeling those times I saw your face frustrated and angry, and I want to talk to you about it, because now I get what some of the frustration was a little bit, help me understand and navigate. But of course he wasn't there, so my brother and I would talk a bit. But what was a saving grace for me was I actually got a new dad out of my church. His name is Harvey. Really great man. Was a leader in the church, and we just grabbed it. He didn't know it for a while, but I was following him like you talked about. Mm-hmm. He was my dad. I was like, oh, Harv. And I'd ask him questions. I go to his house, and he embraced it. He still calls himself my dad. I still call him my dad. And he was a blessing. But then there were other brothers. Dallas was a big brother, and Richard, and all these guys and one of the ways that happened was not just through just serving in the church, And Dallas was running the men's ministry at the time, and I want him to talk to us a bit about the accountability groups that we started at the church. And there were these groups of men that came together on a Saturday morning, and we would meet and talk. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how it happened, and from your perspective, what the value of that was, and then the rest of the brothers can talk a bit about any experiences they've had that was similar to that after that.
I think the roadmap for our accountability groups was Ed Cole and T.D. Jakes, and men that were reaching out to men in general in a new way. They were prompting us to be honest, to be transparent, and just to shoot from the hip. And one of the things that I realized in going through and setting up accountability groups was the accountability groups, there had to be a level of trust. And that was new for me, and that was new for all the men there. So through the process of having conversation every Saturday morning, we were there at 8 and we met for an hour. It wasn't an hour and 10 minutes. It wasn't an hour 30 minutes, because we were all obligated and had busy schedules. So we said, we're going to do this for an hour every Saturday morning. And for the married men, it's before our wives and kids got up and we had to tackle the honey-do list. So we committed that hour and we were out of there. But this is the thing. In that hour, we covered a lot of ground. And after the first 3 to 4 months, we had shared so much, so many things, and so many personal things that men just don't share publicly. We were amazed because none of it got out. So much so that 6 months, the men and their behavior at the church and how they serve changed. And the bishop says, to your accountability group, because something's going on there. It's good, but the men are changing, and I need to be a part of that. And I had to tell him, you can't come.
Yep.
Sorry, Pastor, not being disrespectful, but we got something good. And these men are being transparent in a way that they've never been able to be transparent before. And what you're seeing is the result of men that can finally be honest. To say, hey, I'm struggling at this. Hey, I don't really understand this. And then they discovered they weren't the only one. In that accountability group, and as it began to grow, we had to keep breaking off into subgroups because we were told not to let it grow larger than 10. So just constantly breaking into subgroups. But this is what happened. They were transformed, marriages restored, drug addictions eradicated. Men that were in the church dealing with homosexuality came out and got their lives clean. Because they were being honest. And none of us were there to judge the other person. And it just took off. It took off. And of course, shortly after that, a year or two, I got relocated to Texas, but they still go on today because we need each other. And not only do we need each other, we need to be transparent and we need to be honest. I'm intentional about what I do. And I really get tired of people talking the talk and not walking it out. That is an issue for me. That we could do is, again, be honest. And if this is what you say the issue is, let's walk through this together. If I know that you're struggling with drugs and you feel like you got to go out, call me. Because wherever I am, I'm getting up and I'm going with you. And we're going to do it together if you're going to do it. And it was that type of camaraderie. We were just there for each other, and it was transforming. And that's where I am today in counseling married couples or whatever, because you find that people are honest because they don't know how to be. And they don't usually know if it's safe to be. Mm-hmm. But once they feel that they can trust you and their business is not getting out and you're serious, don't tell me what to do. Let me watch you and see what you do. as leaders, as men, we have to be influencers in our family, influencers in the organizations that we work. Everybody talks a good game. But when I can watch Quincy from a distance and I hear what he says, but I watch, that's the thing that convinces me that he's somebody I need to know, because he doesn't tell me to pick the trash up. He goes and gets it first. And when you do that, people watch you. That you will be surprised, between the four of us, five of us, how much people are really paying attention to what we do and how we live our lives. They may not say anything, but I'm telling you, when their back's against the wall, hey, Quincy, we've never talked, but there's something about you. I can trust you, and I'm in a jam.
Yeah. So, Ron, have you had, I want to check and see if you had any situations, either whether it was a formal group or whether you had some kind of accountability circle or what have you, anything similar to that, like that to you that you've had in your life, or even if something that was informal that you found yourself in a circle of brothers?
No, I'm a very private person. I'm not a group person. And because my life is very public,
right,
I cannot always trust someone. And one of the things that's really disappointing is in the church, even in my church, I can't go to someone, even in leadership, because people will spread your business. Yeah. People will look at you funny. It's very difficult to be free and honest when you're going to be judged. It's even hard sometimes to go to your spouse, because they may even judge you or look down upon you because they feel that's not how a man should be, or everybody has their way of thinking of this is how a man should be no matter what. It's very, very difficult for me to go to someone. So when I trust you, I trust you, and that takes a long period of time, and it's not very many I share with, because people just can't wait to run and tell your business. I've got to be free. One of the reasons why strip clubs are so packed and casinos are so packed and bars are so packed is because men feel free. They're being judged. They feel like they can let it all out. Now, those may not be the best places or the appropriate places for them to be, but they're going to go where they feel that they can be free and not judged. One of the reasons men don't run to church is because they're judged. You know, men shouldn't feel, and they're only going to give you so many. And then when you get to a certain age, for instance, when you're 50, they feel like you should have it all together. There are many 50-year-old men dealing with 25-year-old pressures. They're dealing with all kind of situations that they just can't let out because they feel you should have it all together. Even at 50, even at 60, I'm not 70, I'm only 48, 49, but I'm realizing, man, there's some things I need to talk to someone about. And I do have an older friend. He's 20 some years older than I am, but he's honest with me and he's free. He doesn't judge me, and I can share. And once I get it off, I'm good. You know, he can give me a logical reasoning behind why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. But in terms of trying to do public things, this is a rarity for me because I don't really share. I only want to release what I want to release.
Right. Understood.
You know, and when I'm ready, a lot of things I release sometimes come on stage.
Right.
You know, comedically, the tears of a clown.
That makes sense. Yeah. Derek, how do you as a friend and a brother and just a confidant or even a counselor, how do you other people feel safe, that you're a safe space? What are some of the ways that you are that you're being with people that allows, you know, that you believe allows them to feel safe and open up to you when they're, you know, whether it's a big issue, small issue?
Well, you know, Ernest, it's a God-given talent. I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah. I thought so. I do agree.
The subtle arrogance of Derek, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
I'm just blessed.
Let me just first say this, and I'm speaking generally, and I'm sure some women will say stereotypically, but I think when we talk about trust, I think when it comes to women, they start with trust, and I think you lose it over time through your actions. I think with men, you need to build that trust over time, right? And as the quote says, I think trust is built through trust is built and maintained through many small actions over time. And I really think most men abide by that premise, right? So having said that, I epitomize that. Let me just say that. That's how I am. I don't trust easily. But when I trust you, I'm going to trust you hard, because it took such a long time for me to allow you into that gate of trust.
Mm-hmm.
So my friends recognize that with respect to me, and discretion is key with me. And if you talk to any of my friends, if you tell me something, it stays with me, and I expect the same reciprocity, right? But for me, it's just creating that safe environment. And what I do sometimes is, if I know someone is going through something, just through my instincts, I'll throw out that I've gone through this, just so I can create that environment of comfort for them. So for instance, my friend whose mother is in her 4th stage of cancer, he came over and he was talking to me, and I know he was like around. I can't use the term I grew up with, but it starts with a P and ends with foot. So you guys know what I'm talking about, right? So he was dancing around the topic. But then I just came out and just said, when my mom was going through this is how I felt. He just broke down and started crying. And again, because of my father, I don't do well with people who cry around me. But I took that moment to let him know it's okay to have that experience right now, because he knows that he has to be strong for his family. And I think, so for that entire night, man, we were there for 2 or 3 hours just talking. He let everything out. And now when he calls me, he just shoots from the hip, like you said. He just starts talking. And I'm on the phone like, okay, but of course I want to be that person for him. So I don't rush him off the phone, because I think as hard as it is to build trust, I think sometimes it's so easy to break it, and we have to be mindful of that. And so while I haven't had any sort of formal groups like Dallas mentioned, I have a lot of informal accountability sessions with my friends.
That's great. Quincy, and then certainly I know you do deal with this, and certainly in your counseling practice, but even beyond that, just talk a bit about how you've experienced being that safe space, but also how you find that safe space for yourself.
So being that safe place for me comes in 3 different forms. Number 1, I am non-judgmental. Who you are and where you are in life, I will always accept you for where you are and who you are. And number 2, and this was already mentioned by Daric, but I use a lot of self-disclosure myself, especially if someone is coming to me with an issue that I have dealt with in my past. Whether I dealt with it effectively or not effectively, I share it. And I think it creates a space where people feel like they can share more. Number 3, and I think the most important, is that I'm a very good active listener. And I think people hear or see me listening as a symbolic invitation for them to share more. And the combination of those 3, of not judging anyone, that I also will share and put myself in that vulnerable spot, and that you will always have an attending ear to whatever you may have to say, to me does the trick in terms of providing a safe space for anyone. In terms of where I find it for myself, that has actually been a journey that I am still on. I too have had my trust broken. When I hear something I told someone in confidence and then I hear from someone else, very disappointing. And it serves as a lesson that I really have to be very mindful and careful of who I disclose anything to. I do have, family members and people that I do trust that I can share. But those people over time in numbers become very, very small group that you feel like you can tell anyone to, anything to. But I feel like as long as you have one person, and whomever your God is, that you can also go to and share, you should be okay.
Great. But I want to deal with one topic that I think would be an important one for us as men to talk about. And over the course of my life, I've had, I think there's 3 that I can recall, men who have come out to me, whether it's as homosexual or bisexual, and having that trust to come to me I wanted to be real careful, and one of them was at a fairly young age. I didn't know exactly how I'd handle it, and others were later in life. What have you all had an experience, whether it's family member or friend, and talk a bit about how you have tried to handle that? I felt honored, in fact, for one of my friends because I know he hadn't told anyone. When he told me, I actually did feel honored, and I treated it like that, like it was like he had opened up to me about probably the most sensitive thing he could talk about in light of our culture, in light of our society, especially back then at that time. And I just tried to make sure that I handled it carefully and let him know he was loved. What if anyone's had that experience, want to jump in and talk a bit about how we can help others who are listening to be prepared and to be sensitive, or whatever needs to happen in that situation, to make sure that they're handling the person's trust carefully, especially over an issue as sensitive in our society. Unfortunately, the progress we've made has not caused it to be any less of a sensitive issue, especially for men, because of all of the various discrimination and other things that happen. Does anyone want to take that question, get us started?
Say this, Quincy just said, not being judgmental. I think in that situation, that is extremely important and probably a large part of the whole sharing process. Again, I did encounter that at the church.
Yeah, how did you deal with that, especially considering the kind of churches that I know we came out of? How do you balance that? Because you want to be, I think I'll just state it straight. I think I want to be much more sensitive to the person and lay aside my beliefs or whatever's going on, because I really am looking at that life and not necessarily that sort of Christian experience or whatever it is. So how have you balanced that?
I think I had to be sensitive. I was older, about 27 years old, and I think he may have been 22, almost done with college. And basically just had conversations about it, spiritual and secular conversations about it. And think his problem was trying to fit in and not be outed. And I get it, and I got it then. So the key was to be sensitive. Also, Quincy talked about listening. So I listened and I listened. And then when it came to the activities and the outreach outreach events that we did with the men, I always went to him to say, what do you want to do? Let's talk about your hobbies. Because we know the men, we wanted to go fishing, play basketball. What do you want to do? He shared and said, hey, I like tennis. As a matter of fact, we were both, Ernest, in the hood. He was already golfing. We weren't.
Right.
So he says, I've been golfing, because he was at a white university. Ooh, I hate to say it that way, but golfing. So we tried to do things that would support him and not just the normal things. And then I just encouraged him. I says, when you began to feel a little more comfortable, our pastor is someone also with a big heart. Talk to him.
Okay.
And I'm going to be here. The other brothers, nobody's judging you. And the brothers embraced him, not even knowing all of what he was going through.
Gotcha.
So
let me just see if someone else, I know we have a couple minutes. Anybody else want to share on that topic? But that was really good. I think the sensitivity is the key point. Anybody else have something to share related to Quincy?
I can. I'm. This is a good issue to talk about and to bring up, especially in the Black community. As a clinician, I've ran LGBT support groups. I support our gay brothers and sisters. I really do. I started that in 2004. There was a presidential election going on at that time where LGBT issues were at the forefront of our political discourse here in America. And I was astounded at some of the things that these students were telling me. You better bring a girl home, or we're snatching your tuition. you better bring a boy home or we're disowning you. There is an extra layer of anxiety that comes from, especially when these individuals are coming from Christian homes or from homes where there are parents where there is a huge consequence if you don't change. And the desire not to change or to stay who they are, to stay true to who they are, it is a very, very complex conflict when you are in the church and you want to believe what is being taught to you, and that Jesus is there for you, and that God is your father and he'll always keep you. But then you have this desire within you that is pulling you in this way that seems to be in conflict with the church. And so listening to that issue, the concept of coming out to, am I only out to myself? Who can I come out to? And what are the consequences of me coming out? Back in the 80s, the consequences of you coming out in the Black community could mean death.
Indeed.
Yes. So that was earth-shattering for me. And I just became very accepting and very careful with this population because I wanted to help them and I wanted them to feel safe, that if they came out to me, that nothing bad would happen to them. And happened because they finally got it off their chest and they found someone who did not judge them and did not say something to them to make them feel 10 times worse than they were already feeling. So that was pretty much my experience.
Great. Now, brothers, I want to just thank you all for your sharing. I know we ran up right up against our time here, but I wanted to thank you all for coming and for sharing so openly and so freely. This is a critical topic, I think, for all people, but in particular for men. And we shouldn't overlook how much our culture and our upbringing does impact the way we interact and communicate. But I think what you shared tonight is really going to help many men who've listened to us tonight. Tune in next week when Dana Being Dana will have the Real Housewives of Naperville. It should be a fun time. I know one of the housewives, and I don't know if she's watching. I didn't see her log in, but she's hilarious. So we're gonna want to tune in and check that out. But thank you all. This is Ernest for Dana Being Dana, show number 6. Thank you for tuning in.